You're watching 12 WKRC TV, a new generation of news. 12 Newsmakers starts now.
Good morning and welcome to Newsmakers. Major news stories of the week, famous people in the news, underlying trends in urban development and education that will shape the headlines next week or next month. Those are the usual focus of Newsmakers. Some issues don't make headlines very often though, but they deserve discussion on a regular basis. In my mind, homelessness and affordable housing are two of those issues. In the first part of the show, we will focus on homelessness, in the second half on affordable housing. I am joined this morning by Donald Whitehead, who directed the Greater Cincinnati Coalition for the Homeless from 1997 until early this year. He now works for the Goodwill Industries. Several weeks ago, Mr. Whitehead was named the chairman of the National Coalition for the Homeless, which is based in Washington. Donald, welcome back to Newsmakers.
Thank you, Dan.
The National Coalition, what is that? What is that organization? What's it do?
Well, the National Coalition is a 38-member board that advocates for the emergency needs of homeless people around the country. It's made up of homeless providers, homeless advocates, and formerly and currently homeless people. What it does is we do a lot of policy work in Washington, D.C. We do some public education work throughout the country, and we also do some organizing with homeless people.
Now, is one of the focuses there, because it's in Washington, my guess would be to do some lobbying as well?
Yes, we do on a regular basis talk with primarily officials at HUD. We've talked to officials at Justice. We regularly talk to the senators and other officials in the D.C. area. HHS is very important to us.
And how long have you been a member of that board?
I've been a member of the board for 3 years, and I've been a member of the executive committee for 2 years.
Now, what's this going to mean, to be the president of the chairman of the board? Is that right?
It's going to mean a lot of work, actually. There's a lot of changes going on at the National Coalition right now. We're in the midst of a executive director search. There's this 3-year strategic planning process, and we're also in the middle of what's just unionization by our staff. So there's also collective bargaining.
Unionization by the staff of the homeless organization.
Exactly.
That's very interesting.
It's very interesting.
You know, the question that I know is difficult to answer, but I think has to be asked, in terms of numbers, either locally or nationally, however you want to try to approach this, what kind of numbers of people are we talking about being homeless?
Well, let me say this first of all. It's a very difficult issue to ever count the homeless because of movement, because of location. I mean, people live under bridges, in abandoned buildings, that sort of thing. We do a very good job here in Cincinnati. Fortunately, the last study we did was back in 1992. We're currently in the midst of another study. That being said, the numbers from that 1992 study were from 18 to 25,000 people on a year in Greater Cincinnati that were homeless.
That doesn't mean they're homeless for the entire year.
No. At some point during that year, 1992, there were 18 to 22,500 people homeless.
What does your gut tell you about where we stand today? I mean, 1992 is a long time ago, different economic conditions. Where do we stand today?
Today, my estimate would be around 30,000 for the year.
So more?
More. Definitely more. There's been a dramatic increase in the number of families and children that are homeless. Actually, they make up about 44% of the population right now.
You know, there's this big push that we're hearing about to count the homeless during the census, to make sure the undercount. How effective, from your perspective, how effective is the Census Bureau being?
We worked actually for 10 years with the census, the National Coalition did. We met with all of the people that were shaping the census in Washington. They took some of our suggestions and it helped with the count. However, most of our suggestions they chose not to take. And I think that the count—
What would be a suggestion that you made that they didn't take?
Well, for instance, as I said in the very beginning, it's really hard to count homeless people on one night. They did a one-night point-in-time count of homeless people, which is impossible. It's impossible to come up with an accurate number by doing a one-night count. There's two specific times when homeless numbers change dramatically. In the summer, women, the population of women and families goes way up. Excuse me. In the winter, the population of men goes way up, and for different reasons. And we could hopefully get into that. But because of that fact, because the population changes so dramatically over a year, it's impossible to get an accurate count of homeless people in the city or in the country in 4 hours.
You know,
one night.
As you know, my son works in Spokane, Washington,
Exactly.
in a homeless shelter. And he was very frustrated because the Census Bureau there insisted that they were going to go out on this one night and try to find people,
Right.
rather than coming to the House of Charity where he works at noontime or in the evening when people were, and trying to do a count. I mean,
Right.
is that the sort of thing that happened all over the country?
It happened all over the country. They did do a shelter count.
They didn't do it there.
They did a shelter count here, and they also enlisted homeless advocates to help them identify outdoor locations. However, a strange thing happened here in Cincinnati. 2 days before they did that outdoor count, the Cincinnati Police Department did a sweep of some of those outdoor locations. So some of the evidence wasn't there when the census.
Why
people-
did they do that? Was that intentional?
I believe it was intentional. What I got from the police department was that it was done because of citizen complaints. I think it actually was done because, you know, it gives the city a black eye to find out that there's, you know, 1,000 homeless people living outside. It's really a tough population. We found in Cincinnati and Spokane, actually, this issue is even bigger. A fairly large number of runaway kids that are homeless also. It's more prevalent out in the West Coast, of course, but here in Cincinnati, we had a project that we thought we were going to count about 40 outdoor runaway kids, and it turned out to be over 100. A lot of those kids are in the Clifton area. So.
You know, one of the things that I get asked all the time, or I hear people talking about, well, gee, there's such a demand for jobs out there right now, for employees. There's a lot of jobs. Why does anybody have to be homeless? Why can't people just get a job and solve those issues?
Well, there's two very big reasons for that. The biggest reason there is homelessness in this country, drug addiction, mental illness, all that stuff aside, is the lack of affordable housing. And while a person may work full-time every day, it doesn't necessarily say they'll be able to afford the housing in their city. In Cincinnati, 40% of the people that are in homeless shelters work every day. They don't work at a livable wage, however. A livable wage is about $7 an hour in Cincinnati if you use HUD's fair market rent. You know, most jobs that people that live in homeless shelters are taking are jobs that pay the minimum wage, which is about $5 an hour. And that's for a single person. If you're a family, a livable wage is more like $9 an hour, because that's what it takes to afford the fair market rent. So two people making minimum wage have a hard time meeting their housing cost at 30% of their income, which is ideal by HUD standards.
Mm-hmm. Now, you know, you at the beginning of that, though, you said if you take drug addiction, alcoholism, mental illness and put that aside. But in fact, you can't put that aside with the homeless, can you?
No. I just what I meant in saying that is that, you know, one of the big stereotypes about homelessness is that everybody's either drug addicted or mentally ill, but they only make up together about 40% of the population. The rest of the population has other reasons for homelessness. You know, some of it is just economics, some of it is the lack of a livable wage, and there's about 20 other reasons why people are homeless. So I just wanted to, you know, make sure that people understand that that's not the only reason people are homeless.
You mentioned earlier that more women and families are becoming elements in the homeless population, and particularly seasonally. Why is that?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, the biggest reason in some cities, now Chicago, Illinois, for instance, the biggest reason people are homeless, families are homeless, is domestic violence. Another big reason is welfare reform, of course. It's estimated that about 800 families by October the 1st, 2000 will lose their benefits and may at that time become homeless
We're
because of
talking
welfare
800
reform.
families in Cincinnati?
In Hamilton County.
In Hamilton County. So the welfare reform that everybody was paying attention to 3 years ago, right? Was it a 3 year cycle?
It was 3 years ago.
Okay, so that 3 year cycle is coming up and we're now going to be facing that.
Right. People are now about to hit the wall. They're about to lose their benefits. Ohio, unfortunately, the rules for welfare reform are more stringent than the national rules. So it's 3 out of 5 years, and the national rules are 5 years. So a lot of people will be hitting that wall and have no benefits whatsoever, and they are probably facing the loss of their housing.
Now, from a policy point of view, because that's what this coalition that you're now chair of,
Right.
what is it that you would like to see change, either on the national level or on the Ohio-Cincinnati level?
Well, definitely on all of those levels, the production, the production of affordable housing. This country has gotten away from producing affordable housing since the mid-'80s, and coincidentally, that's when the growth of homelessness at its present stage really started. We stopped using our federal dollars to fund the production of housing. We're now using federal dollars to demolish housing, as we see in the Hope 6 projects in the West End. And
because you mentioned that, and we're going to talk about that a little bit in the second half of the show, not with you, but with somebody else. What's your view of that?
Well,
of Hope 6, because the argument is, yes, they're tearing down certain units, but because of vouchers, the units will be replaced. There will still be the low-income vouchers, Section 8 vouchers that can be used other places. It'll just be more dispersed. So what's your view about Hope 6 and that kind of project?
Well, Hope 6, the idea of Hope 6 is a wonderful idea, to take distressed public housing and change that housing into mixed income communities. Wonderful idea. It doesn't work for a couple of reasons. First of all, the biggest reason for me as a homeless advocate is just the loss of units. We have asked that when Hope 6 projects are done, there's a one-for-one replacement of hard units. Not the vouchers. The vouchers are great. People get vouchers. There's a couple of problems with those, and I'll talk about that just a little bit. I'll talk about that right now.
Okay.
The biggest problem with vouchers is that while a landlord cannot discriminate against a person because of their color, because of the number of kids they have, they can not accept that voucher. A landlord does not have to accept that voucher, so we have people sitting in homeless shelters with those vouchers.
And there's literally no place to go rent.
No. If you don't, if a landlord does not accept that voucher, the voucher is useless. However, if you have the hard unit, someone can always live there. The other problem with vouchers is that the way HUD actually markets its vouchers doesn't meet some of the rent levels for some of the better housing. So people, the idea of Hope 6 is to give people housing choice wherever they want to go. Because of the level of the vouchers, they actually can't go into some of the communities that would be better communities for them. They have to go in communities that, in a lot of cases, are a lot less habitable. Some of the what we find is that people don't move from, the West End to, say, Westchester. They'll move from the West End because of the voucher to over the Rhine, or the West End to maybe Avondale or something like that.
Well, we're out of time this morning.
Okay.
Thank you for being with
Well,
us.
thank
and
you
we're
for
going to
having
move
me.
on to the affordable housing issue in some more detail, and we'll talk to you again in the future.
Well,
Good luck with the new position.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay.
And thanks for having me.
Okay. Related to the issue of homelessness, as Donald has been saying, is the development of affordable housing. Stay tuned. After the break, I'll be joined by the director of one of the area's more effective private not-for-profit organizations that has a track record of success in producing affordable housing in the Old Basin.
Not only was it totally vacant, you could stand in the basement and get wet when it rained. There was no floors, no roof. It was just in pitiful condition.
No more. After years of blight, 1901 Freeman Avenue reopened 10 days ago to a purposeful future. The substantial old brick building has been totally renovated and will once again provide dignified homes for families. The building offers spacious apartments with wonderfully large rooms, high ceilings, modern amenities, and 3- and 4-bedroom units. I am joined this morning by Mark Lenear, the Executive Director of the Miami Purchase Preservation Fund and the organization that did Freeman Avenue and opened it last week. Welcome to Newsmakers, Mark.
Thank you.
What is Miami Purchase Preservation Fund? Those of us who have been around the historical world and maybe historic preservation know a little bit about the old Miami Purchase Association, which doesn't exist anymore, now Cincinnati Preservation Society or Association. What's the Miami Purchase Preservation Fund?
Miami Purchase Preservation Fund is a nonprofit housing development organization with the mission to revitalize historic neighborhoods by providing home ownership and rental opportunities, primarily for neighborhood residents.
And when you say older neighborhoods, what West End is particularly where you have focused, is that?
Yeah, our board of directors has decided to focus on the historic West End, primarily the Dayton Street Neighborhood Association. It's filled with these wonderful Italianate buildings that I guess date back to the 1890s. So, and the neighborhood obviously needs a lot of help. So we've focused on that neighborhood.
So for example, with that building on Freeman Street that you reopened 2 Fridays ago, how long, what condition, you mentioned at the beginning there that you could stand in the basement right before you took over. How long had that been sort of unused? It was vacant, right, for a number of years?
Yeah.
How long had it had been useless and sort of sitting there?
It predates my existence at Miami Purchase Preservation Fund. However, I think that from what I've heard in the neighborhood, probably it's been vacant for some 15, 20 years. The building was very key to what we were doing because it stands on a prominent corner at Freeman and York Streets in the West End, cat a corner from our office. I got tired of looking out the window and seeing such a desolate building.
Now, that building, there are 4 units, 4 apartments that are on 1 floor each, and then 1 multi-level unit. Yeah. So there's 4 units. Describe the units a little bit and what they rent for.
We turned that building into an absolutely gorgeous building, and you saw when you went through and you showed some of the pictures. It has actually 3 on separate levels and then 1 townhouse. The buildings are all air conditioned. They have ceiling fans, washer dryer hookups. Pretty much unknown in the field of affordable housing also.
And these are 3-bedroom apartments, right?
3-bedroom apartments.
So this is really for families. This
Really
is
for
not
families.
just little tiny places.
That's right.
Am I right, when that building would have originally been built, you would have had a lot more units in it than that?
That's very true.
Yeah, an old building, 1880s, 1890s building like that probably would have had 4 or 5 units on a floor, would have been my guess.
Yeah, a lot of people come in and they cut the buildings up and put a lot of units in order to get more money out of them. But we believe in doing things for families. There's a lot of families who live in the West End, and we want to serve that particular clientele. So we believe in building the larger units for the families that live there.
And what's the rent for one of those units?
The rent, I believe, is about $430 plus utilities.
$430 plus utilities. Now, one of the issues that came up when we were talking to Donald Whitehead the first part of the show, talking about the availability or the ability to use Section 8 vouchers. Do you take vouchers, Section 8 vouchers in your buildings?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so a person could use that to rent in your buildings.
Yes.
How many units has Miami Purchase Preservation Fund done over the years?
Well over 100. I think it's somewhere around 115. However, I think you have to look at it in the context of what we're doing. We're about trying to revitalize the West End. So it requires a blend of home ownership and rental. If you look at what we did with the Coleraine Freeman Apartments, that there's 21 units there. Then our home ownership project that's ongoing now, that's along Coleraine Avenue, which is a block west of Freeman Avenue. A lot of people don't know that Coleraine runs down there.
And by the way, people going north on I-75, if you look to your right, you're seeing a lot of these buildings. So sometimes when you're going home from work, get off and drive up Old Coleraine or drive up Freeman Avenue. So go ahead.
I think you should also. And then if you look at Dayton Street, which is 1 block north of there, we've done homes on that street. We have a recreation garden that's just below Freeman Avenue at 1926 Freeman Avenue. This is for neighborhood residents also. As you know, inside the inner city, there's very few green spaces outside of parks or places where sometimes families don't go. We want to provide something that's very nice for the families and They can sit back, they can barbecue, there'll be chairs. It'll be a nice area. So we're trying to renovate the whole area with home ownership, rental, and the green spaces.
Now, obviously, one of the things that is happening in the West End right now is Cincinnati Metropolitan Housing Authority is redeveloping Lincoln Court, tearing down a lot of buildings, building some new buildings, but not only replacing them, but building different types of units and trying to create mixed housing where there will be people of different income levels living in the same place. What are your feelings about that approach?
I've been very impressed with what Don Trindle has been able to do, and
Don Trindle being the head of Cincinnati Metropolitan Housing Authority. Okay,
that's
go
correct.
ahead.
And his vision for both sites, both Lincoln Court and Laurel Homes. Miami Purchase Preservation Fund is working with Don Trindle and the Cincinnati Metropolitan Housing Authority to provide off-site housing, and off-site just means different from the sites that they have in our area also. So it will enable us to continue our mission providing these home ownership and rental. I understand that it's about 85 units that they need.
Now, if I understand this correctly, they're reducing the number of units that currently or traditionally have existed there. There won't be as many units, but they're providing people with vouchers so that, in fact, there would be as many units available around the city. What you're saying is that in the West End, you're trying to create a new market there so the people who have lived in the West End can stay in the West End. Is that right?
That's correct. I should say also that one of the things that we're trying to mirror what he's doing on the site in terms of mixing the incomes, because what we have to do is to get the incomes going north, and the appraisals in the area also. So we're planning on doing a mixed income project also, which that will mean market rate housing, home ownership, rental, that is what we're doing now, affordable rental, and just mixing the incomes.
You know, now that runs, as a historian, that runs counter to over a century of tradition of people moving out to the suburbs and everybody living in neighborhoods where everybody's almost exactly alike, economically, socially, and to a large extent racially. You're running counter to that trend. Do you think that is a future trend in the 21st century?
I think it is. You have to mix your incomes and have everybody helping everybody else. So we're going to try to do it. In
the case of Miami Purchase Preservation Fund, you said you've created over 100 units. Very honestly, we hear of other not-for-profits who have not turned much at all. And what is it about your organization that you think makes your organization successful? I'm not asking you to criticize anybody else, just what is it that makes your organization successful?
I think two things. I think, first of all, our board of trustees. It kind of all begins and ends there, and their vision and their mission. We have people who understand the development business. We have attorneys, we have community people, we have everybody who's pulling in one direction. I think, too, we have a professionally managed staff, highly qualified in all the areas that we have. Now, I should say that we only have currently 3 people. We have, in the last week, added a 4th person and an assistant director.
Well, I'm out of time, and thank you very much. Good luck. Congratulations on the new building, and keep it up because it's very important to the whole city.
There are 6 of them, I should say.
Okay.
Okay.
Very good. Okay. Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Several weeks ago, we ended the show with some images of children taken by Danny Ranselhoff. The response was so positive, I decided to close this morning with some more of Danny's images, this time some of Cincinnati's poor and homeless adults from the 1950s and 60s. On this Sunday morning, as Jews recall the liberation promised by the Passover and Christians celebrate the promise of resurrection and rebirth, look into their eyes. How should we respond?